The worst thing my ex ever called me was not fat. It was forgettable. Looking back, that was the word that hurt the most. Not because he actually said it out loud, but because he made me feel it every single day before he left. The restaurant was unusually quiet for a Friday night. Most customers had already gone home, leaving only the soft hum of refrigerators and the distant clatter of dishes from the kitchen. I stood alone in the storage room, organizing boxes of napkins I had already organized twice. Sometimes people pretend to stay busy because stopping means thinking, and thinking was dangerous. Especially tonight. My phone screen glowed in my hand. A photo had appeared on social media 30 minutes earlier. Tyler stood beside a woman I had never seen before. Blonde, thin, beautiful. The kind of woman magazine covers seemed to manufacture in factories. They were smiling. His arm rested comfortably around her shoulders. Under the picture was a caption that made my stomach tighten. Some people inspire you to become your best self. I laughed softly. Not because it was funny, because it was absurd. For a moment, I simply stared at the screen. Then I locked it and slipped it into my apron pocket. You are stronger than this, I whispered to myself. The words sounded convincing until they left my mouth. Suddenly the room felt smaller. The walls seemed closer. The silence became heavier. I leaned against a shelf and closed my eyes. My ex said I was too fat to be loved. The sentence escaped before I could stop it, barely louder than a breath, barely louder than a secret. Yet somehow saying it out loud made it real again. I swallowed hard. And the worst part is that for a while, I believed him. My voice cracked. I hated that. I hated giving old pain new life. I hated that his opinion had occupied space inside my head for so long. Most of all, I hated that a part of me still wondered if he had been right. A noise came from the hallway outside. I immediately wiped my eyes and straightened. Embarrassment arrived before curiosity. Maybe a coworker had heard me. Maybe someone needed supplies. The door opened slowly. My heart nearly stopped. Vincent Moretti stood there, tall, impeccably dressed, calm gray-blue eyes studying me with an expression I could not quite read. Vincent owned the restaurant. Actually, he owned several restaurants, along with half a dozen other businesses throughout the city. Employees spoke about him the way people talk about thunderstorms. Powerful, unpredictable, impossible to ignore. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I wanted the floor to open beneath me. He had heard it. I knew he had. The silence confirmed it. I am sorry, I said quickly. I did not realize anyone was there. Vincent remained still. Then he shook his head once. You do not need to apologize. His voice was calm, controlled, yet there was something underneath it. Something unexpected. Concern. I looked away immediately. Being pitted felt worse than being judged. What I did not know in that moment was that the quiet confession I thought would disappear into the darkness had just changed both of our lives forever. The next morning, I convinced myself the conversation in the storage room had never happened. That was easier than accepting reality. People like Vincent Moretti did not spend their time worrying about waitresses. They ran companies, signed contracts, made decisions that affected thousands of people. Whatever concern I thought I had seen in his eyes was probably nothing more than basic human decency. By lunchtime, I had almost succeeded in believing my own lie. Almost. The restaurant buzzed with its usual rhythm. Orders flew into the kitchen. Plates disappeared from tables. Coffee refills seemed to multiply every time I turned around. Busy was good. Busy left less room for memories. Unfortunately, memories have a habit of showing up anyway. Around 2 o'clock, my phone vibrated. A message from the hospital. My stomach tightened instantly. I stepped into the hallway and opened it. Thankfully, it was not an emergency. Just another reminder about my father's upcoming appointment. Relief washed over me so quickly that I nearly laughed. Living with constant worry does strange things to a person. You learn to celebrate ordinary days. When I returned to the dining room, Rachel was waiting with a grin that immediately made me suspicious. What? I asked. Nothing. Rachel. Her grin widened. The owner asked about you. I froze. Why? I do not know. She leaned closer. But I have worked here 4 years, and he has never once asked about me. I rolled my eyes. You are being ridiculous. Am I? Before I could answer, a customer waved for assistance. The conversation ended, but the thought remained. The owner asked about you. By the end of my shift, I had almost forgotten about it. Then I walked outside and found a black sedan waiting across the street. Not unusual in Manhattan. What was unusual was the man standing beside it. Vincent glanced up from his phone as I exited the building. For a second, I considered turning around and pretending I had forgotten something. Too late. He had already seen me. Miss Bennett. His voice carried the same calm confidence as before. Mr. Moretti. He studied me for a moment. Not in a way that felt uncomfortable. In a way that felt attentive. How is your father? The question caught me completely off guard. I blinked. How did you know about my father? A faint smile touched his face. You mentioned him to another employee last month during a staff event. I stared at him. I barely remembered that conversation myself. Somehow he did. Vincent opened the rear passenger door of the sedan. I was heading toward Midtown. Allow me to give you a ride home. Every alarm bell in my head immediately started ringing. Not because he seemed dangerous. Because I hated feeling indebted to anyone. That is not necessary. I know. He nodded toward the darkening sky. Rain clouds were gathering overhead. It is simply an offer. I looked up. The first drop landed on my sleeve. Then another. Somewhere above us, thunder rolled softly through the distance. And for reasons I could not explain, I suddenly felt as though life was quietly placing a new chapter in front of me. Rain drummed softly against the windows of the sedan as we pulled away from the restaurant. For the first few minutes, neither of us spoke. Manhattan blurred beyond the glass in streaks of white, gold, and red. Normally, silence made me uncomfortable. This felt different. Calm. Like neither of us was in a hurry to fill the space. Vincent sat across from me rather than beside me, reviewing something on a tablet. Even that small detail surprised me. Most powerful men I had encountered spent their lives trying to dominate every room. Vincent seemed perfectly comfortable letting the room breathe. Eventually, he set the tablet aside and looked up. You seem nervous. I laughed despite myself. You own half the city. One corner of his mouth lifted. That is an exaggeration. Only half of an exaggeration. To my surprise, he laughed quietly. The sound transformed him. For a brief moment, he looked less like an untouchable businessman and more like an ordinary man. Fair enough, he said. Another comfortable silence followed. Then he asked, how is your father really doing? The question caught me off guard because most people asked out of politeness. Vincent asked like he genuinely wanted the answer. I looked down at my hands. Some days are better than others. The treatments help. The bills do not. His expression softened slightly. That must be difficult. It is. I stared out the window. But he spent his entire life taking care of me. Now it is my turn. Vincent nodded slowly. No pity. No advice. No speech about staying strong. Just understanding. Somehow that meant more. When the car stopped outside my apartment building 20 minutes later, I reached for the door handle. Thank you for the ride. You are welcome. I hesitated. Then curiosity won. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why are you being nice to me? The question escaped before I could stop it. Immediately, embarrassment followed. Vincent studied me for a moment. Not offended. Not surprised. Thoughtful. Because kindness should not require a reason. I looked away first. That answer somehow felt more dangerous than any other response he could have given. The next few days passed quickly. Work remained busy. Life remained complicated. Yet something had changed. Not dramatically. Subtly. Every time Vincent visited the restaurant, he acknowledged me. Sometimes with a brief conversation. Sometimes with nothing more than a nod. Yet each interaction carried the same feeling. Respect. Then came Tuesday afternoon. The lunch rush had just ended when the front door opened. I glanced up automatically and immediately wished I had not. Tyler Brooks walked inside. My stomach tightened. I had not seen him in months. He looked exactly the same. Confident smile. Expensive clothes. The same man who once made me question my worth. For a second, panic threatened to return. Then something unexpected happened. The feeling disappeared almost as quickly as it arrived. Because for the first time, I realized his opinion no longer carried the power it once had. What I did not know was that Tyler had not come to eat lunch. He had come because he needed something. And very soon, he was about to discover that my life no longer revolved around the version of me he left behind. Tyler chose a table near the window. Of course he did. He always liked being seen. Some people carry confidence naturally. Others perform it like a full-time job. As I approached with a menu, he smiled as if no time had passed at all. Sophie. Hearing my name from him felt strange now. Familiar but distant. Like a song I used to know. Tyler. I kept my voice professional. Calm. Neutral. The same tone I used with every customer. For a brief second, disappointment flashed across his face. I think he expected more. Surprise, anger, emotion, anything that would remind him he still occupied space in my world. You look good, he said. There was a time when those words would have meant everything. Now they sounded oddly empty. What can I get for you? His smile tightened. Straight to business? I am working. He glanced around the restaurant. Still here, huh? The comment carried just enough judgment to reveal the man underneath. Some habits never change. I wrote nothing on my notepad. Would you like something to drink? He sighed. Coffee. I nodded and turned away. Behind me, I could feel his eyes following me across the room. The old version of me would have felt self-conscious. The new version simply continued walking. 20 minutes later, I noticed something unusual. Tyler was not eating much. He barely touched his sandwich. Instead, he spent most of his time checking his phone. Every few minutes his expression grew more frustrated. Calls unanswered. Messages ignored. Even from across the room, the pattern was obvious. Something was wrong. Around 3 o'clock, the restaurant doors opened again. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Employees noticed first. Then customers. Vincent Moretti stepped inside wearing a dark suit and an expression of quiet focus. He was clearly on his way somewhere else. Yet the moment he entered, conversations softened slightly. Not because anyone told them to. Presence does that. Vincent spotted me immediately. Good afternoon, Sophie. 3 simple words. Respectful. Warm. Genuine. I smiled despite myself. Good afternoon. Then I noticed Tyler. His entire posture had changed. He stared at Vincent with visible recognition. And something else. Nervousness. Vincent exchanged a few words with the manager before turning back toward the entrance. As he passed my station, he paused. How is your father? Better this week. A small smile appeared. Good. Then he left. The interaction lasted less than 30 seconds. Yet when I looked toward Tyler again, his expression had completely transformed. Confusion, shock, calculation, all fighting for space at once. The moment I returned with his check, he leaned forward. How do you know Vincent Moretti? There it was. The real reason he had been watching. I placed the receipt on the table. I work here. That is not what I mean. His voice lowered. You know him personally? I thought about the question. Then I answered honestly. He is a friend. Tyler stared at me as though I had spoken another language. And in that moment, I realized something important. He still saw the woman he left behind. What he could not see was that she no longer existed. What Tyler did not know was that discovering Vincent's place in my life was only the beginning of a much bigger surprise. Sometimes the people who change your life never announce that they are doing it. They simply keep showing up until one day you realize everything feels different. A week after Tyler's visit to the restaurant, I arrived at the hospital expecting another routine appointment with my father. The waiting room smelled like coffee and disinfectant. Familiar, uncomfortable, expensive. I checked him in, filled out paperwork, and prepared myself for another conversation about treatment schedules and insurance complications. That was when the receptionist smiled and handed me a folder. Good news, she said. I frowned. Good news was rare enough to sound suspicious. What kind of good news? She glanced at the screen. The financial review was approved. I blinked. Approved? Yes. She nodded. The remaining treatment expenses have been covered through a private assistance program. For several seconds, I simply stared at her. There must be a mistake. She shook her head. Everything is correct. My father looked just as confused as I felt. As we walked toward the elevator, I opened the folder 3 different times searching for an explanation. There was none. Just confirmation that a burden I had carried for months had suddenly disappeared. The mystery bothered me all afternoon. By evening, I had narrowed the possibilities down to exactly one person. The next day, Vincent stopped by the restaurant. The moment I saw him, I knew. Not because he admitted anything. Because of the way he looked at me. Calm. Patient. Waiting. I approached his table after delivering a coffee. Did you do something? I asked quietly. Vincent glanced up from a document. That is a very broad question. The hospital. His expression revealed nothing. What about it? I crossed my arms. Vincent. For the first time, a faint smile appeared. Your father deserves good care. My heart sank. You did. He placed the document aside. I made a phone call. Why? The question came out softer than I intended. He studied me carefully before answering. Because you would do the same for someone else. I opened my mouth to argue. then closed it again. The frustrating part was that he was probably right. Vincent leaned back slightly. You spend your life helping people. You never ask what you will receive in return. His eyes held mine. I find that admirable. Nobody had ever called me admirable before. Responsible. Dependable. Nice. Those words I knew. Admirable felt different. Dangerous, almost. Because it made me wonder what else he saw when he looked at me. Later that evening, I sat beside my father's hospital bed while he slept. The room was quiet except for the distant sounds of nurses moving through the hallway. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Curious, I opened it. A business article filled the screen. The headline mentioned Tyler's company. The words financial losses appeared 3 times in the first paragraph. I stared at the article for a moment before locking my phone. Life was moving in opposite directions. One path was opening, another was collapsing, and somewhere in the middle stood a man who had heard a broken whisper in a storage room and quietly decided it mattered. The first sign that Tyler's world was changing came from something he could not control. Silence. Not the peaceful kind. The expensive kind. The kind that arrives when phone calls stop being returned. 2 weeks after the article appeared, his name seemed to vanish from conversations that once revolved around him. Investors became busy. Partners became cautious. Opportunities became delays. Every path forward suddenly included obstacles he had never expected. Meanwhile, life felt strangely lighter for me. My father's health continued improving. The constant fear that had followed me for months no longer sat on my shoulders every morning. For the first time in a long time, I could breathe without immediately worrying about what disaster might come next. One evening after work, Vincent invited me to dinner. Not a business dinner. Not a charity event. Just dinner. The distinction mattered. We sat at a quiet restaurant overlooking the Hudson River as city lights reflected across the water. The atmosphere was elegant without feeling intimidating. Soft music drifted through the room. For a few minutes we simply talked about ordinary things. Books. Travel. Family. The kind of conversation that reveals who someone is when they are not trying to impress anyone. You know, Vincent said eventually, most people spend their lives trying to become important. I smiled. That sounds like something a very important person would say. He laughed softly. Perhaps. Then his expression became thoughtful. The irony is that truly remarkable people rarely realize their own value. I knew he was talking about me. The realization made my cheeks warm. I looked away toward the river. You give me too much credit. No. His voice remained calm. Certain. I think the people who failed to appreciate you gave you too little. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Outside, boats moved slowly through the darkness. Inside, something shifted that neither of us felt the need to name. Respect had become trust. Trust was becoming something deeper. Across the city, Tyler sat alone inside his apartment staring at a financial report he could barely understand anymore. Numbers that once represented growth now represented losses. Every solution seemed temporary. Every problem seemed permanent. Eventually, he opened social media and began scrolling without purpose. That was when the moment Tyler learned my connection to Vincent was real, something changed inside him. It was not jealousy at first. It was disbelief. People rarely question their own judgment until reality forces them to. For weeks he tried convincing himself that what he saw meant nothing. A few conversations. A few photographs. A few coincidences. But coincidences have limits. Eventually, even he could not ignore the truth. One afternoon, Tyler attended a business networking event in Midtown, hoping to secure funding for a struggling project. The ballroom overflowed with executives, investors, and entrepreneurs. Normally, environments like that energized him. This time felt different. Every conversation seemed shorter than expected. Every opportunity felt slightly out of reach. As he moved through the crowd, he overheard a familiar name. Vincent Moretti. 2 investors stood near a display table, discussing a recent charity initiative. One of them mentioned Vincent's attendance at several community events over the past few months. Then the second investor said something that made Tyler stop walking. He is always there with that woman from Queens. The first man smiled. The waitress? Yes. Tyler pretended to examine a brochure while listening. Who is she? The first investor asked. The answer arrived. Immediately. Someone important to him, apparently. Tyler felt his stomach tighten. Important. The word echoed inside his head for the rest of the afternoon. Meanwhile, My life continued moving in a direction I never expected. My father was stronger. Work felt easier. Even the future seemed less intimidating. One Saturday morning, Vincent invited me to accompany him to a community center opening in Brooklyn. The event itself was simple. Families gathered. Children played. Local businesses donated supplies. Nothing glamorous. Yet I noticed something interesting. People genuinely liked Vincent. Not because of his success. Because he remembered names. He listened. He paid attention. At one point, an elderly woman approached to thank him for helping fund a neighborhood program. Vincent spent 10 minutes talking with her, as though she were the most important person in the room. Watching him changed something inside me. Power was not what I thought it was. Real power looked a lot like responsibility. Later that afternoon, we stood outside beneath clear blue skies as volunteers packed away tables and chairs. Vincent handed me a bottle of water. "You look thoughtful." I laughed softly. "You make helping people seem normal." "It should be normal." I looked at him. "For someone who supposedly owns half the city, you have surprisingly simple opinions." His smile appeared instantly. "Do not tell anyone. It would ruin my reputation." Across town, Tyler sat alone staring at another photograph someone had posted online. This one showed Vincent and me laughing beside a group of volunteers. Nothing dramatic. Nothing romantic. Yet somehow it bothered him more than anything else. Because for the first time, he understood something he should have realized long ago. Vincent saw value in me that had nothing to do with appearance. And the more Tyler thought about that fact, the more one question refused to leave him alone. What if the woman he dismissed was actually the best thing that ever happened to him? The call came on a rainy Wednesday afternoon. Not to me, to Vincent. We were sitting in his office overlooking Manhattan while gray clouds rolled across the skyline. I had stopped by to deliver documents for a charity project we had been helping organize. The city below looked small from 40 floors up. Cars moved like toys. People rushed through sidewalks carrying umbrellas. Everything seemed ordinary until Vincent's phone lit up. He glanced at the screen. For the first time all day, his expression changed. Not dramatically, just enough for me to notice. "Everything okay?" I asked. Vincent looked at the name before placing the phone face down on the desk. "That depends." My curiosity immediately woke up. "Who is it?" He leaned back slightly. "Tyler Brooks." The room became very quiet. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows. Inside, neither of us spoke for several seconds. Eventually I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it felt surreal. Months ago, hearing Tyler's name could ruin an entire day. Now it felt like hearing news about a stranger. The phone rang again. Same caller. Vincent ignored it. Then a message arrived. Then another. Then another. Persistence has a way of revealing desperation. Vincent finally picked up the device and read the latest text. "He wants a meeting." I raised an eyebrow. "With you?" "Yes." "Why?" Vincent's expression remained calm. "I suspect he is about to tell me." 2 days later, the meeting happened. I was not there. At least not physically. But Vincent told me enough afterward to understand exactly how it unfolded. Tyler arrived early. Vincent arrived on time. Apparently some habits survive every crisis. They met inside a private conference room overlooking the city. Tyler looked tired. Not from lack of sleep. From carrying too many disappointments at once. His business problems had grown worse. Investors had disappeared. Projects had stalled. Doors that once opened automatically now remained closed. According to Vincent, the conversation started with numbers and business plans. It always does when people are avoiding the real issue. Eventually, Tyler stopped pretending. "I need help," he admitted. Vincent simply watched him. Calm. Patient. Unimpressed. "With what?" Tyler hesitated. "Everything." A long silence followed. Then Vincent asked a question so simple that it apparently changed the entire conversation. "Why are you really here?" Tyler looked away. The answer took several seconds to arrive. "Because I made mistakes." Vincent nodded once. "That is true." Another silence. Then Tyler finally said my name. "Sophie." Just hearing that part later made my chest tighten. Not from pain. From distance. Like listening to a story about someone I used to know. Vincent told me Tyler spoke about regret. About choices. About opportunities he never appreciated until they were gone. Eventually, he asked the question that mattered most. "Does she ever talk about me?" Vincent's answer was immediate. "Rarely." That single word apparently landed harder than anything else. Because the truth was unavoidable. My life had continued. My happiness no longer depended on the person who once questioned my worth. When Vincent finished telling me about the meeting, I stared out at the rain-covered skyline. Somewhere across the city, Tyler was finally learning a lesson that should have taken months instead of years. The people who truly matter are not the ones who make you doubt yourself. They are the ones who help you remember who you are. Some victories are so quiet that nobody notices them except the person who fought for them. 3 weeks after Vincent's meeting with Tyler, life continued moving forward. The leaves had begun changing color across the city, painting parks and sidewalks in shades of gold and amber. My father was strong enough to take short walks again. The restaurant remained busy, and for the first time in years, I found myself making plans that extended beyond the next hospital bill or work schedule. One Saturday afternoon, a local community organization hosted a fundraiser along the river. Families gathered beneath white tents. Children ran between activity booths. Volunteers carried boxes and arranged tables, while music drifted softly through the crisp autumn air. I spent most of the day helping wherever I could. It felt good to be part of something simple, something positive. Near sunset, I stepped away from the crowd to enjoy a few quiet minutes beside the water. The skyline shimmered across the river as the city prepared for evening. That was when I heard my name. Sophie. I turned and immediately recognized the voice. Tyler stood a few feet away. For a moment, neither of us moved. He looked different, not because of his clothes or appearance, because the certainty he once carried had disappeared. In its place was something far more honest. Humility. "Hi," he said. "Hi." The conversation that followed felt strangely peaceful. There was no anger left inside me. No desire to prove anything. No need to revisit old wounds. Tyler glanced toward the river before speaking again. "I owe you an apology. Years earlier, those words would have meant everything. Now they simply felt like part of the truth. You do not have to." "Yes, I do." He took a slow breath. "I spent a long time measuring people by things that never should have mattered." His eyes met mine, and I was wrong. The apology was sincere. I could hear it. More importantly, I could see it. Not in his words. In the person standing in front of me. Life had taught him lessons that pride never could. I smiled softly. "Thank you." Tyler nodded. Relief seemed to pass through him. Then he laughed quietly. "You know what the worst part is?" I raised an eyebrow. "What?" "For years I thought I was looking for someone better." He shook his head. "Turns out I was standing next to someone extraordinary and never realized it." For a second, neither of us spoke. Then I looked toward the crowd where volunteers were packing supplies into trucks. Vincent stood among them, helping carry boxes despite several people offering to do it for him. Typical Vincent. Powerful enough to command entire rooms. Humble enough to move chairs after a fundraiser. Tyler followed my gaze and smiled sadly. "He sees you clearly." "Yes," I said. "He does." A few minutes later, Tyler said goodbye.